Alright, this is Friar Roderick here for AirMaria.com, and we're at the state capitol of Connecticut. And we're here with Peter Wolfgang of the Connecticut Family Institute.
Friar Roderick, thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, now how did it go today? You had a rally to persuade the Judicial Committee to not squash legislation.
Well, we had a rally for liberty because there's really two issues at stake now. There's the question of marriage itself, protecting marriage as the meaning of man and a woman in Connecticut and preventing it from being radically redefined, and really just protecting even our very right to self-government, because this was a rally about the state Supreme Court here in Connecticut. There is a case pending that, like what happened in Massachusetts, could result in a judicial imposition of same-sex marriage on Connecticut. So we were rallying today to ask the state Supreme Court to do the right thing, to not impose same-sex marriage on Connecticut, but to let the people decide.
The Supreme Courts in other states, with the exception of Massachusetts, have ruled that marriage is a special institution in our society, not a civil right, and have chosen not to define it. Those courts felt that altering this unique and special institution was a legislative matter, left to elected officials and the people they represent. And that's why we're here today. We're here this morning to voice our hope, our fervent and strong hope, that wisdom will guide the justices of the Connecticut Supreme Court to reach that same decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bishop Macaluso. You heard Bishop Macaluso talk a little bit about the special importance of marriage that proponents of same-sex marriage do not understand, and how we pray for the wisdom of the court, that the court will choose to do the right thing in this pending decision in the Kerrigan case. It's interesting. That's pretty much how the cultural left, the anti-Christian movement in this country works, is they know the public's not with them, so what they do is they try to go through the courts, the least democratic branch of our governments, in order to force their will upon an unwilling populace. But an interesting thing has happened since Massachusetts. They won this, amazing victory for their side in 2003 with a judicial imposition of same-sex marriage in Massachusetts. Every state Supreme Court that has dealt with this issue since Massachusetts, even very liberal courts, New York, Washington State, have gone the other way. They haven't followed Massachusetts. They've said, in a representative democracy, something this big belongs with the legislature. Why did they do this? Because no matter, judges will never admit it, but no matter what they say, they do take note of public opinion. They saw this amazing uprising on the national level against what happened in Massachusetts, and they blinked. They pulled back and said, this is too hot. We're giving this one back to the legislature. And so we're here today because we know that the courts do pay attention to public opinion, and to ask the Connecticut Supreme Court to do the right thing.
Yeah, it does work. I know some of the legislators here have basically pulled the hidden behind that dodge that they don't have any influence over the judges, and really they are people, right? And they do have they do respond to people. So we're here basically to talk to people and convince them to act like people, and basically.
I think that's true. Judges are people. They are looking ahead to their role in history, and they should be asking themselves, do I want to be a part of the court that distorts Connecticut's politics for generations to come? Because that's essentially what happened with Roe v. Wade on the national level.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was nothing in the Constitution that really supported that, right?
Absolutely. And, I mean, look, even if you're someone who's for so-called abortion rights, if you have the so-called pro-choice position, take a look at what Roe v. Wade did to our national politics. Think about the other issues that were big when Roe was handed down in 1973. The Vietnam War, Watergate. This stuff is ancient history now, but Roe v. Wade is still with us as if it was just handed down yesterday. It completely altered our domestic politics. To this day, elections and judicial nominations revolve around where people stand on Roe v. Wade. If you do the wrong thing in Kerrigan, if our state Supreme Court imposes same-sex marriage on Connecticut through the Kerrigan case, it will likely have the same effect. It will roil state politics for years to come. It's not worth it. They should let the people decide.
The Kerrigan case is a case that you're here to oppose, right?
Yes, Kerrigan versus the state of Connecticut. This is a case nearly identical to the case in Massachusetts, even brought by the same group of lawyers, seeking a judicial imposition of same-sex marriage on Connecticut. We've filed a friend of the court brief, and we've asked the court to not do this terrible thing, but to let the people decide.
How many people came out today?
I don't know, Friar. I'd be curious for your opinion. You were here. It looked about 200 to 300 people to me.
Yeah, my guess is over 200 people.
Yeah. 250, let's say. I mean, I was up there at the podium, so I had kind of a bird's eye view, but it did look to me like it was over 200 people.
Right. Yeah, I did a rough count, yep. And you also mentioned the international aspects of this whole movement as far as gay marriage and what effect it's had on marriage in other countries. Do you want to cover that a little bit?
Yes, well, in the Scandinavian countries, where the same-sex marriage agenda is further advanced beyond what it is here in America, what we've seen is a decline in marriage in general. Fewer people are willing to enter into normal traditional marriage. Why? Because marriage is hard. It's tough. And, if you live in a society that prizes marriage, normal, traditional marriage, and says, this is something special, this is something that we're going to hold up as an ideal, then people are more willing to make that effort. But if traditional marriage becomes just one option among a sort of do-it-yourself salad bar, then fewer people are willing to enter into the matrimonial state. So same-sex marriage leads to a decline in marriage in general.
Right. So the whole romantic idea of living happily ever after is gone, basically.
Right, and it's also true, frankly, of heterosexual cohabitating couples. I mean, traditional marriage, keeping that relationship, that activity within the bounds of traditional historic marriage is in the best interest of society. Right.
That's where it started, right, with heterosexual promiscuity and cohabitation, and that led to this, and what will this lead to next?
And no-fault divorce. Let's not forget no-fault divorce. I mean, it needs to be said that same-sex marriage didn't cause the decline in marriage and family life that we're experiencing in America today. It is a symptom of it. It really begins with those of us in the rest of the country that, maybe haven't been living our marital vows as fully as we can, who haven't, basically changed the laws back in the 1970s to make marriage less than even the place that contracts have in our law. A contract isn't a contract if one person can just unilaterally walk away from it. But that's what we've turned marriage into. Marriage counts for less than a contract. So, I mean, that helped get us to the point where I think, homosexuals said, well, if this is all marriage is now, why not us? Why can't we have in too?
That's a good point. So basically we have to get back to some real serious values, or we're going to lose all. I mean, you talked about Europe and the hate crimes. That's basically they can't even talk about this anymore, right? And so we're going to lose our ability to even have a democratic process, to even dialogue about this. It's getting to the point where you almost have to be deviant in our society in order to be accepted.
I guess I'd use the phrase counterculture, that we're not the culture anymore. We've been, to the extent that Christianity was at least sort of, in Judeo-Christian principles in general, a kind of unofficial establishment in this country that in our culture at least, that we've been disestablished, that we've been kicked out of the public square, and that values that are not just different, but are actually opposite and hostile to us have taken over. Nature abhors a vacuum. Something's going to rush in and fill that space. And when the traditional Judeo-Christian ethic that governed our nation's culture and mores for most of its history since the 1960s got kicked out of the public sphere, something else has rushed in, and that's the situation that we're in now.
So they're very powerful, and the irony is they're actually using some ploy that they are somehow not powerful to get this protected class status.
That's right. They're looking at getting suspect class status in our laws, and therefore using that as the basis for the court to give them same-sex marriage. But one of the prongs for suspect class is political powerlessness. Now, same-sex households, same-sex couple households in Connecticut in the 2000 census made up 0.6% of the population in Connecticut, and yet they brought us to the brink of same-sex marriage. They have a civil union law. No one can reasonably claim that pro-same-sex marriage activists are somehow powerless in the state of Connecticut. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Pete, for giving us this great interview and for all you're doing here, too.
Thank you, Friar Roderick, on behalf of the Family Institute of Connecticut, and I want to say thank you to AirMaria.com.
Great. Thank you, Pete. Ave Maria, this is Friar Roderick here for AirMaria.com. Thank you for viewing us, and Ave Maria.